Thanks for joining the webinar. We are going to get started in just a moment. My name's Julie. I'm an admissions counselor at Divine Mercy University for the Master's in Clinical Mental Health Counseling program. And I'm joined by Dr. Masson.
Welcome, everyone. I appreciate you so much being here this evening. As Julie said, my name is Ian Masson. I am the director of the IPS Center for Psychological Services at Divine Mercy University, and I'm a licensed professional counselor as well. The IPS Center is affiliated with Divine Mercy University. We provide sliding scale mental health resources to the community, doing outpatient sessions for clients. And we're also the training clinic as well, where students who are in the doctoral program complete an externship to start gaining work in clinical experience and really kind of implementing the clinical skills that we've learned. So I am a graduate of Divine Mercy University as well. I graduated back in 2013, and I've been working for the past 8 years in a community mental health agency before coming back to Divine Mercy University to direct the IPS Center. Today, I'm really excited to be joining you and talk about how a master's in counseling can really help prepare you to help others achieve emotional healing and growth in their personal lives. Something that, if you're interested in this field, you're going to see a lot of emotional wounds that have happened, and the skills that you will learn in a master's in counseling, in this master's in counseling program, will really prepare you to heal some of those emotional wounds that you encounter, and be an instrument really of God's grace in that healing. So one point, if you happen to have questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat or utilize the Q&A. Kind of the structure of presentation today, I'll be doing my presentation first. Julie will then have some slides as well at the end, and then we can take questions at the end if there are any questions. Okay, so just briefly, kind of the points that I'll be looking over today with you all. I'm going to take a little bit of an overview of emotions, what emotions actually are, kind of their role in our life, and some of the problematic responses that you're going to find most clients have towards their emotions, and also the results that can occur because of their responses. And then finally, we'll kind of look at how a master's in counseling can help with healing and maybe kind of have a different, healthier response to the emotions that occur in our lives. Okay, so first off, I think it's just important to identify what are emotions. Right, technical definition, they're a mental response to a stimuli. Basically, our emotions either move us towards something that is good or away from something that is evil. They're a created, ordered part of us, which means they were given as part of our nature by God. Now, I know when I say that they're kind of created, ordered part of us, some might have a response of well, if you saw my emotional life, you would know that it's anything but ordered, right? I know I've had that experience where your emotions can seem kind of all over the place. We often do perceive our emotions as obstacles, and you will find that in your clients' lives as well. We think that basically we're supposed to be unbothered maybe by everything in order to achieve holiness. So that person who, cuts you off on the highway of you think your reaction is supposed to be God bless them. I hope they have a wonderful day. Or for myself, I'm a father of 5 kids, that when they're orbiting around me like a bunch of tiny planets, that I'm just supposed to be little children, isn't it wonderful? And that those things that we experience throughout the day are not supposed to bother us, that we're not supposed to have emotional reactions to them. So, I use those kind of examples, those kind of funny examples in a way, but this is also true for the more painful emotions as well. The sense of shame that we carry around something that has happened to us, the sadness that we've experienced at the loss, a hurt that we've experienced because of past interactions with family or friends, or anxiety around something that we don't want to do. Now, what this tends to then do is lead us to neglect our emotions. So frequently we then end up kind of pushing those emotions to the side. And this is where some of kind of like the defenses start to come into play. So defenses would be things like repression of emotions, sublimating them, trying to channel them into some other kind of area, denial of our emotional experiences. Also, there's then the response of others too, because it might not just be personally that we do these things, but if others in our lives have maybe dismissed our emotional experiences, then we can also kind of learn to do the same thing, where you kind of cut off those parts of ourselves because they're either rejected or they're too painful to handle. Now, in the short run, that can serve a purpose. So if you think of like a doctor who's experiencing like a trauma surgery and they need to be kind of on the job, right? They might have to put aside some of their own emotions in order to be present to the person who's there on the surgery table, right? So our defenses fulfill a need. The difficulty is when we don't come back to them and give our emotions then space. Because what basically happens is that when we don't come back to the emotional experience, we're essentially cutting off part of ourselves. And we're then not trying to understand maybe where our emotions are coming from. So this disconnection, it comes with a cost. Typically that means we're not as in touch with our emotions, which means that we don't necessarily know what we're feeling or why we're feeling it. And which also means that we can't necessarily as effectively bring those emotions to God. If I'm just kind of focused on pushing them to the side, I can't really be present to them and make them part of even my spiritual life as well. We also then end up ignoring information. As I said, emotions are meant to move us towards a good or away from an evil. They're sources of information. If we just try to kind of deny that they're there, we can miss out on valuable things that emotions might point to. And then there's also just the long-term emotional pain and even sometimes like physical consequences that can come from repression. Pretty common knowledge of like stress manifesting as like ulcers or things like that. Emotions signal what is going on within us. If we just focus on keeping them out of our awareness, there is a natural pull for the trouble to come to the surface. So imagine if you were trying to like hold down a beach ball underwater, right? The more you try to kind of hold that beach ball down, the more it's going to try to kind of like pop, and you're really having to work to like hold it under the water. It's the same thing with our emotional lives. The more we try to suppress our emotions, the more that they're basically trying to kind of get to the surface. As I said, I'm a dad, 5 kids, a lot of kid movies. So Inside Out, great movie, love it. Concept of leakage kind of comes in here. There's a point where Joy is trying to keep the emotion sadness in her circle so that she doesn't get out and she doesn't contaminate anything. Well, sadness basically keeps kind of like bleeding over, like no matter how hard Joy is working to keep her kind of away from things, sadness kind of keeps leaking out until the end of the movie, where sadness is really given space to be able to just sit and be. And that's difficult. It's very difficult for clients to do. But that's kind of where we as counselors come in. So how can we kind of support this process? We support it by developing really a relationship of acceptance and understanding with the client. So it can be very intimidating, I think, for us to think about, how to help a person who's maybe struggling under the emotional burdens. But really the essence of the healing occurs within a relationship, which is something that I love about the master's program. It's emphasized really is just the healing power of the therapeutic relationship. The skills that you learn in the master's program are really focused on developing that relationship. The reason for that is because often the responses to our emotions are to maybe rationalize them. We try to approach them with logic. I shouldn't feel this way. That's not rational. This isn't right. But really, again, if you have somebody who's hurt, they don't necessarily need a rational response. They need an encounter with somebody who is willing to be present with them in their emotions. What that can lead them to, if they have somebody who's willing to do that, they can then be willing to encounter some of those parts that maybe they've shoved off to the side. And also it can then maybe lead them ultimately to encounter with God as well, who also wants to encounter them in those places of woundedness and hurt. So I always like the idea of you are the best intervention, because it kind of takes the pressure off of us too as counselors. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to know what to say or what to do, because really at the core of our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, we're searching for some good that we believe will make us happy. And the proper insight into the motivation of those psychological realities can help us kind of sort out our lives. But it takes a level of curiosity and compassion and receptivity in order to really get to that place of being able to understand where our emotions coming from. Because again, emotions need to be respected and listened to and accepted before they are then willing to submit to guidance. They need empathy before they can say, okay, now we can choose to do things differently. Another example of, from Inside Out, there's a point where Joy is trying to get another character to kind of come and, do what she wants to do. He's sad about something that he lost, and she's doing all these funny faces and trying to make him laugh, and it's just not working because he's sad. And sadness goes and sits with him and just empathizes. It's like, you're really sad about that loss that happened, and sits with him in his sadness. And that's actually then what allows him to move forward. Again, as a parent, lots of times where I've tried to rationalize with a toddler who is maybe experiencing very strong emotions, especially my son, who can get very angry at times. After numerous trial and error experiences, I found that really what he needs is to be held, and just be held in his emotional experiences. And in essence, that's what we're doing for our clients when we approach them with curiosity and compassion. This is where the master's in counseling comes into play, because we can develop a sense of curiosity and compassion towards the experience of others. And then when we combine those with the skills that you develop in the master's program, you're able to not only more fully enter into their experiences, but you can help them do the same. And so remember, this is something that they may have been avoiding. And so it's a very painful experience. But when we then can approach it with curiosity and compassion, their defenses start coming down of like, oh, I guess maybe this isn't as much of a threat as I thought. I can allow myself to experience these feelings without fear of being overwhelmed by them or dismissed or rejected by others. So basically what will happen then is you'll have these good interpersonal skills that you learn within the master's counseling that can help exiled parts of clients feel safe, heard, and accepted. So in the master's in counseling program, we really focus on attending skills of being present and connected with another person and allowing them just to share their story. You think of, if you're familiar with some techniques of like, unconditional positive regard, for instance, of just receiving the person as a human person whose emotional experiences are valid. Sure, maybe they don't necessarily deal with their emotions in the most healthy way, but just acknowledging that they have those emotional experiences. If you can imagine maybe in your own life when you've been faced with a person who's just really compassionate, and what does that do for you? Typically, that allows us to achieve a level of insight, because we can start kind of looking inward about what is kind of going on inside, because that person is doing the same thing for us. And then within the master's in counseling program, they add a depth at each kind of stage of working with the client. So it starts with just developing those attending skills of how to connect with another person, even on like a physical level of being present with them and eye contact. And then starting to develop the skills to really help explore a person's narrative and their emotional and cognitive experience, their history, just getting them to the point where they can really feel comfortable with sharing their story, feel like there's somebody who wants to know what their story is. And then once they've kind of started to develop that comfort, helping them to start make connections and develop a level of insight between how they feel and what they do, maybe how what they do impacts their feelings, where maybe some of those feelings are coming from. As they're feeling safer in their narrative, they can kind of start looking at, oh, this is now why I respond in anger. Anger is actually a protective emotion because I can't feel like I do something wrong. So I respond in anger to push somebody away from me. As they're then developing those insights, that's then where we can really collaborate with them on developing maybe a plan for how they want to respond to those insights by kind of coming up almost with an action plan. It's easy. Sometimes we think counseling depends on us to kind of maybe have the answers or tell people what to do. It's really actually not the case. We really want to just create an atmosphere of them sharing their story and then walking with them in it. And as we do, helping them to make connections between what they're feeling and what's been going on in their lives. So again, it takes a lot of pressure, I feel like, off of us as counselors because we don't have all the answers. I know that I don't have all the answers for my clients, but I can at least be present with them and explore what their experiences in life have been like. What I've found happens typically as a result is that you have a client who's better connected with themselves. They're able to experience more self-acceptance as well, because we're connecting with them and we're accepting of them. They're also able to connect and accept others better, because our defenses aren't necessarily as up when we're then better able to connect with our emotional experiences. And that again can possibly even lead them to a better connection with God. Sometimes we can have, because of our emotional experiences, maybe a distorted God image. God as a punitive judge or kind of a harsh taskmaster or something like that. That often comes from emotional wounds that we've experienced in our lives. The more healing that occurs and that we can really kind of receive what those emotions have been and just acknowledge that they're there and practice compassion and empathy towards them, those defenses can start to die down and allow for a greater connection with God as well. Because they're better able to accept maybe more distasteful parts of themselves, we can basically then bring those more effectively to prayer. And so then they're experiencing fewer instances of leakage. If I can just acknowledge that guy cut me off and that really angered me, that really bothered me. Or if I can acknowledge, my parent said this to me or didn't say this to me during my childhood, and that really hurt. And just allow that to be present, not wallow in it, but just allow it to be present, then we can bring those more effectively into our prayer lives as well. This also then, I put this point about less self-pressure and burnout, because that's actually more for ourselves as counselors and helpers. It's easy to experience that pressure to maybe have all the answers, which can very much lead to burnout of like, I don't know how to help this person. But we're avoiding a talking at mentality, telling a client, well, this is what you need to do kind of deal. I feel like the Master's in Counseling really does emphasize that very well. We're not telling people what to do in their lives, because that puts the pressure on us to supply the answers. Really, in the end, if you, in the Master's program, you're using the skills developed there to be curious and compassionate towards a person so that they then feel safe in sharing their story and connecting with those parts of themselves that maybe they have rejected or dismissed for a long time, possibly even for most of their lives. So hopefully that maybe motivates you a little bit to find out more in the Master's in Counseling. I'm going to end my slides right now and shift over to Julie to allow her to present a little bit more on the Master's in Counseling.
Thanks, Ian. That was great. Very informative. I learned a lot myself. Again, if you have questions, Ian will be happy to answer them. Just pop them into the chat as we go, and we'll take care of them at the end of the webinar. Doing it that way allows people who have to leave maybe to drop off, if they have to scoot, and you can always catch the recording on YouTube. Right, so I just ask you to consider if you're thinking that becoming a mental health counselor is something you might like to consider. Just ponder these points a bit and see if this might be the right path for you. Ask yourself, do you have the desire to help heal the whole person and to help people flourish? Do you want a career which would enable you to answer the question, how can I help people? What can you do to make a positive contribution in others' lives? Can you be an instrument of healing? And lastly, if you were to apply and be admitted, are you able to commit to the successful completion of the program? That's a fancy way of asking, are you someone who finishes what you begin? Right. So these are all good points to consider as you think about a Master's in Counseling. Everyone wants to know right up front, how much does it cost? So we'll go right to it. It is a 66 credit master's degree, and the cost per credit is $866. So if you do that math, you get $57,156. There is a $50 technology fee per class for a total of $1,100. There are some lab fees as you move through your studies. Those total $375. And then we have a residency fee. Residency is time spent on campus over a long weekend, 3 times as you move through your studies. There's a fee for each of those trainings, $1,500 per residency. That fee covers your training, obviously, but also your hotel and most of your meals while you're here. So $1,500 per residency times 3 for a total of $4,500. So all that together gives you a total tuition value for the whole program, start to finish, of $63,131. So we do have a number of ideas for ways to make the degree affordable. We do participate fully with the federal loan program. So if you felt like you wanted or needed a student loan, we can certainly help with that. Some employers do offer tuition reimbursement. So if you're planning to work while you're in school, that's a good question to ask at work to see if that might be a benefit available to you. We're also approved for veterans funding. We participate with the GI Bill, we're the VA. We're also a yellow ribbon school. We do have a number of scholarships available. You can find them easily on our website. Just search scholarships on the DMU website and it'll pop right up. Our scholarships are designed very nicely so that everybody qualifies for something. And the way scholarships work is you can apply for 4 and you can accept 2. So we also have a matching scholarship. So any outside support you can find from outside the university, whether it's a fraternal, a religious type organization, an agency, a church, Knights of Columbus, something like that. So we would match that up to $2,000. And then we also have a cash plan we can set up internally that's interest-free. So if you felt like, you could chip away at it a little bit each month, we can set that up at no charge. There's also an interesting federal program called National Health Service Corps. If you just search that name, it'll come up first link. This is a tuition forgiveness program. And the way it works is if you're willing to work in an area designated either low income or underserved for 2 years after you graduate, they will give you up to $50,000 towards your tuition cost after you have served 3 months of that 2-year time period. Since you have to work under supervision anyway for 2 years after you graduate, this is an awesome way to go if you can work it out. I know a number of students who've taken advantage of this program. I encourage you to search it, check it out. So there are two paths you can take at Divine Mercy University for funding your education. You can either apply for scholarships or you can take a tuition reduction through a partnership. So this is just a smattering of the many partnerships we have established. I think we have around 25 partnerships right now. We just added the Archdiocese of Vancouver. So for people in Canada, that's great. So if you are affiliated with any of these organizations, you reside in one of these dioceses, we also make partnerships at the parish level. It's good for a 20% tuition reduction for your whole time in school. So you can feel free to contact me with more information on how to take advantage of a partnership if you recognize one of these. And I encourage you also to go to our partnership page on the website and just search and see. We add more all the time. So our entrance requirements are a bachelor's degree. It can be in any field. Advanced basket weaving is great by us. We have an entry-level program, so as long as you have a bachelor's degree, that's fine. There are no prerequisites. We also require a minimum GPA of 3.0 overall, or in your major, or in your last 60 credits. If you're close, but you're afraid you might be a little under, that's not necessarily a deal breaker. Again, contact me, outside of this webinar. I'll be happy to talk about a workaround for you. We also require the GRE. The thing about the GRE is that we do not use it to make admissions decisions. We need you to do it. We don't care what you get. So I'm happy to put that in writing. I'll send you an email that says basically the same thing. We just need you to do it. We don't care about any minimum score. And then our last acceptance requirement is there is an interview process. So there are 2 online interviews to be done. The first one's easy. It's a quick 30 minutes with me. Mostly it's a coaching session to get you ready for the big interview. That is a 3-hour online group interview with 2 or 3 other applicants to the program and 2 faculty members. Our application process is pretty straightforward. The first step is just an online demographic form. It takes 20 or 30 minutes. You can do it tonight if you want to. Once we have that, financial aid and I as well will be in touch to start talking with you about next steps. Next step would be the FAFSA. Right now we're enrolling for the May cohort. So people who start school in May do the 21-22 FAFSA. We also have 2 brief essays, a 500-word personal statement, a 200-word professional statement. They'll ask you to upload a current version of your resume. We'll also need official transcripts for any degrees conferred. No need to send transcripts for every transfer credit you ever earned. I don't need to see those. I just need to see official transcripts for degrees conferred. And then we also have a requirement for 1 letter of recommendation. You will see in the application that they're pushing pretty hard for a faculty recommendation. If you didn't stay in touch with a faculty member from your college days, that's okay. Just about anyone else will do. Boss, mentor, spiritual director, therapist, pastor, somebody who knows you well and will give you 5 stars. You will see in the application, there's a link to share with the person who will write your recommendation. We don't require a formal letter. We just need that Google form that's linked in the application. Once we have all of these documents and your financial aid work has been done, we will set you up for your 2 interviews and then hopefully admission. School begins May 25th of this year. You still have plenty of time to apply for a May start. You will take 1 8-week class in the summer, and then you'll have about 6 weeks off before school begins again in August. Well, I want to thank you for attending this webinar, and thank you, Ian, for your presentation on emotions. That was terrific. Again, if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat or the question and answer. We have a few minutes to take questions. If you'd like more information on applying to the counseling program, you can find a lot of information on the counseling pages of our website. You can you can text or call me at this direct number. And of course, you can email me anytime. There is a fee to apply for our clinical mental health counseling program. But as a thank you for attending this webinar, we'd like to waive that fee for you, and you can use this code here at the bottom, CCMMP 1999, to take advantage of that $55 fee waiver. So Ian, if you're still there, it looks like we have one question. Let's see. How many classes do students take in August? Okay, so that's a Julie question. So you can enroll either full-time or part-time. So the way our school year is organized, the fall and spring semesters are each broken down into 2 consecutive 8-week terms, and the summer semester has 1 8-week term. So if you're a part-time student, you would take 1 class in each 8-week term. So if you were starting school in August, you would take 1 class in the first 8-week term, then there would be a 1-week break, and then you would take in the second 8 weeks of the semester another class. So that would work out to be 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring, and 1 in the summer. Full-time students are double that. Full-time students take 2 classes in each 8-week term. So that would be 4 classes total in the fall, 4 in the spring, and 2 in the summer. All right, thank you for that good question. Anyone else? Any questions? All right, thanks again for attending. I appreciate your time this evening. Again, please do take down my number. Feel free to text me at that number. Email is a great way to get me. It can be hard to get me on a phone call, a regular phone call. I am on the phone all day long, but I would love to talk to you. Please text or email. Thanks so much and have a lovely evening.